Hello there. You're watching All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host, Kareem Zachary. To the headlines. The President of the Saharawi Republic, the Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Ibrahim Ghali, stressed the existence of a Zionist Makhzani presence that targeted the Saharan people and threatened peace and security in the region. The Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, arrived in Yerevan on an official visit on Saturday after border clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which killed more than 200 people this week. U.S. President Joe Biden is once again warning his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin against the use of chemical or nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Also coming up to pay their final respects to Queen Elizabeth II, who is interred in Westminster Hall, thousands of people from all over the UK stood in lines for hours at a time overnight along the River Thames. Hello again and welcome to the program. First in our news, the personal envoy of President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, Minister of Justice, was received at the Peace Palace in Baghdad by Iraqi President Barhan Saleh on Sunday. The personal envoy handed an official invitation to Iraqi President to attend the Arab Summit on the 1st of November. Earlier yesterday, the Algerian Minister of Commerce, Kamal Razig, handed on an invitation by the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to the President of the Sudanese Transitional Sovereignty Council. Moving on now, the Secretary General of the National Democratic Rally, Tayyip Zitouni, said that Algeria had made clear progress in organizing the Arab Summit after attempts to disturb it, particularly with regard to the promotion of just issues. In his speech during his meeting with his party's young people, he said that he is confident of the success of the November Arab Summit. Moving on now, the President of the Saharawi Republic, the Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Ibrahim Ghali, stressed the existence of a Zionist Makhzani presence that targets the Saharan people and threatens peace and security in the region. Legitimate rights to freedom and independence, but security and peace and stability throughout the region as well.
There is a Zionist Makhzani regime with other known sites in order to target not only our citizens' rights, but also security, peace and stability in the whole region, including intensifying Moroccan's drug flow to support and encourage organized crime gangs and terrorists. The enemy is still mobilizing its alliances with suspicious agendas to try to influence our people's struggle, resistance and resilience.
To brief European deputies on the issue of Western Sahara and its latest developments, and to coordinate a joint action plan at the level of the Commission to maintain pressure on European countries and urge them to take positions consistent with the Union's commitments and vision on the question of Western Sahara, was stressed by Saharan participants during the session of the European Parliament. The French Council of State ordered the government to ban the import of vegetables from the occupied Saharan territories, based on the decision of the European Court of Justice to repeal the fishing and farming conventions between the Moroccan occupation and the European Union. The step comes to tighten the tunnel on the Moroccan regime, which continues to engage internationally with international companies in such crimes. To the other file now, the Moroccan Secretary General of Justice and Development Party, Abdul Ilah Ben Kiran, condemned his country's normalization with the Zionist entity, stressing that Moroccans were dissatisfied with the act and did not accept normalization. Ben Kiran acknowledged that his party had forcibly signed the normalization agreement with the entity and said that it had come at a time which is painful, as he put it. The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with his Irish counterpart Michael Higgins in Ireland's capital Dublin. Mr. Mahmoud Abbas showed appreciation for the island's political support of the Palestinian cause in the European Union and international forum, particularly in the UN Security Council. The Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, arrived in Yerevan on an official visit on Saturday after border clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which killed more than 200 people this week, aiming to establish a lasting peace between the two enemies.
Our meeting, again, had a particular importance to us because of the focus on security following the illegal and deadly attacks on by the Azerbaijan on the Armenian territory.
Over 100 of protesters marched through Yerevan's city center on Saturday, calling for Armenia to renounce its membership in the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Demonstrators have demanded closer ties with Western nations in order to protect Armenia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, arguing that the participation in the security alliance dominated by Russia does not provide Armenia with protection.
We are here for the European community to finally take action. Everyone is talking only about Ukraine, but now military action is taking place here, which urgently need to be stopped. I'm a refugee from Russia. I was persecuted for political reasons. It turns out that I came here from war to war. I can't stay away. I want this to stop as soon as possible. The CSTO must do something or cease to exist. Azerbaijan and Armenia announced that Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between the two nations resulted in more than 200 deaths this week. This confrontation is the most violent since the conflict of 2020.
The situation continues to be very concerning. We are deeply concerned about continued attacks along the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. We've seen continued attacks now for a second straight day. We are particularly disturbed by continued reports of civilians being harmed inside Armenia.
At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Samarkand, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev on Friday accused Armenia of large-scale military provocation at the country's shared borders, while Kazakh president claimed that the world had entered a dangerous period of serious aggravation.
But unfortunately, on September 13 of this year, Armenia committed a large-scale military provocation in the region of the state border with Azerbaijan. The armed forces of Azerbaijan resolutely suppressed this provocation.
The modern world has entered a dangerous period of serious aggravation of the international situation, where measures of sanctions pressure, as well as confrontational approaches to solving key global problems, have come to the fore.
Despite a Russian-brokered ceasefire on Wednesday evening, the tension between the two Caucasian republics continue to cause concern. Meanwhile, Iran's president called for dialogue and the peaceful settlements of differences between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
We have always emphasized observing the national sovereignty and territorial integrity and preventing any change in recognized borders. Both sides should resolve their differences peacefully through dialogue and in accordance with international law.
The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is a territorial and ethnic dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Of the dispute region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is primarily populated by ethnic Armenians, and 7 neighboring districts, which were primarily populated by Azerbaijan until they were driven out during the first Nagorno-Karabakh war.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday that exhumation work in Izium continued to unearth more evidence of the torture by Russian forces, despite the fact that Washington has called the discovery of mass graves in the Ukrainian city of Izium barbaric. The U.S. administration has rejected a request from Ukraine to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. According to John Kirby, spokesman for the White House National Security Council, designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism would prevent humanitarian aid from getting to Ukraine. According to officials, 5 civilians were killed in Russian attacks in the Donetsk region over the past day, while in Nikopol, several dozen high-rise and private buildings, gas pipelines and power lines were damaged by Russian strikes. The UN nuclear watchdog reported one of the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant's 4 main power lines has been repaired and is once again supplying the plant with electricity from the Ukrainian grid 2 weeks after it went down. US President Joe Biden is once again warning his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin against the use of chemical or nuclear weapons in Ukraine at a time when the Ukrainian army is leading a major counteroffensive in the country.
Don't. It will change the face of war unlike anything since World War II. Do you think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you. It'll be consequential. They'll become more of a pariah in the world than they ever have been, and depending on the extent of what they do, will determine what response would occur.
To a different matter now, the security chiefs of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have sat down for talks to stop fighting on the border between the two countries that so far has killed at least 54 people and wounded more than 100. The Kyrgyz Border Service announced the new round of talks as the two ex-Soviet nations traded blame for shelling that resumed on Saturday morning after Friday afternoon's agreed-upon ceasefire and what appeared to be a brief respite overnight. To pay their final respects to Queen Elizabeth II, who is interred in Westminster Hall, thousands of people from all over the UK stood in lines for hours at a time overnight along the River Thames until her funeral at Westminster Abbey on September 19th. The public will still be able to pass the former monarch. Still in the same story, thousands of people from all over the world came to the British capital, London, to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. The long queue have boosted business profits from some business owners in London. Nabil Khazini reports.
It is a queue of thousands of visitors crowding into central London to spend hours for their turn to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. But while the miles-long line moments of waiting are tiring for some, for others, they are giving a business boost at a time of an economic hardship.
Very busy. I mean, since last 2 days we've been extremely busy. We usually open at 9, but for last 4 days we managed to open from 7.
First of all, they were going first to get some waters and drinks, but now they're buying food because the weather is changing also, and it's a long queue. It's a long waiting, so definitely he had a good boost on the business.
The royal fans are pouring from all over the world to attend these historic moments, including this man who came from India. He says he wants to become part of history.
Yeah, this is the history, you know. This happens once in the lifetime. This is a history. So we became a part of it. That's it.
We're also blessed.
We're really blessed to be here.
The money being spent by visitors offers a glimmer of hope following years of economic stagnation due to the impact of COVID-19 on the country's economy.
After the state funeral on Monday, many of our hotels may be less busy, and it's the way the market responds in relation to the laws of supply and demand. But speaking to our hospitality sector, not just our hotels, but restaurants, bars, and pubs, they've had an awful 3 years because of this pandemic. This is a period of national mourning, and people want to come to London, and so it's hardly surprising when you've got hundreds of thousands of people coming to London. Our hotels, are incredibly busy.
Despite this economic boost in London, other services had to stop due to the Queen's funeral arrangements. A Heathrow spokesperson announced that as a mark of respect, operations to and from the airport will subject to appropriate changes in order to avoid noise disturbance at certain locations at specific times during the day of the funeral.
In England still, the Algerian Foreign Ministry announced that the Algerian Prime Minister, Mr. Ayman bin Abdurrahman, will attend the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain on Monday. Ayman bin Abdurrahman will represent the Algerian President, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, and will be among some 500 heads of state and foreign dignitaries coming to the English capital, London, to attend the funeral. And in the same context, US President Joe Biden and his wife Jill Biden arrived in London on Saturday to attend Queen Elizabeth's II funeral. Biden will pay respect to the late sovereign, whom he met last year and declared afterward reminded him of his own mother. To Sweden now. The Swedes are gathered in Stockholm to protest against racism, a few days after the unprecedented victory of the right and the extreme right in the elections. The elections were marked by the new breakthrough of the anti-immigration party of the Sweden Democrats, which became the second party in the country and first party on the right with 20.5% of the vote. The national television network warned 2 million Japanese who are threatened by the arrival of Typhoon Nanmadol as the meteorological agency issued a rare special warning urging residents to seek their shelter. And for more news around the world, let's follow this report.
A 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit southeastern Taiwan on Sunday, sending people who felt the jolt in the capital crouching on the floor for safety. No casualty or damage has been reported. An hour after Queen Elizabeth II died, orders of thousands of British flags started to flood into a factory south of Shanghai. More than 100 employees were put to work for 14 hours a day, making nothing but the British-themed flags. China opened its first virtual power plant management center in Shenzhen city of the southern province of Guangdong in efforts to sustainably solve the energy crisis as demand for electricity continues to rise. A heavy hailstorm hit the Spanish island of Majorca on Friday. Parts of the island were swept by storms that caused serious flooding. 2 small airplanes crashed on Saturday near Denver, killing 3 people. The ongoing investigation hasn't released the identities of the victims.
And finally in our news, in Ecuador, volunteers build wooden rafts with red mangrove seeds attached and send them into the water in an attempt to counter pollutants contaminating the Guayaquil estuary. Sofian Kanturi reports.
Along the dark waters of Ecuador's Guayaquil estuary, volunteers mired in mud drag wooden platforms. Plans that could save the 70 kilometers of the river mouth from pollution traveled on these rafts. The volunteers bring on their backs one by one the platforms to the river. The 10 rafts, nearly 2 meters long, are tied with ropes made from banana peels.
El proyecto de Islas Flotantes justamente nació de un proyecto.
The Floating Island project grew out of a trial project by another PhD student. He modeled the floating islands and tested them with different materials.
Las islas flotantes, él probó con varios materiales.
These floating islands, which are covered in red mangrove seedlings, are part of the efforts to save the estuary, being led by environmental engineer Angela Ceballos.
Pueden ser una de las principales. No sabemos si es la.
We don't know if this is the main point of pollution or the only one, because I only know that there are 2 points of discharge. There may be pollution upstream. The pollution may come from the river or various industries, which arrives with the water which flows downstream.
The plant is renewed for its long roots, which can absorb pollutants and create an aquatic ecosystem that supports the growth of other plants and animals. For decades, tons of rubbish, exhaust and heavy metals have been thrown into the waters of Ecuador's main port, where 2.8 million people live. Today, the arm of the rivers is dying under the effect of pollution.
And now let's have a reminder of our top stories. The President of the Saharawi Republic, the Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Ibrahim Ghali, stressed the existence of a Zionist Makhzani presence that targets the Saharan people and threatens peace and security in the region. The Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, arrived in Yerevan on an official visit on Saturday after border clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which killed more than 200 people this week. And US President Joe Biden is once again warning his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin against the use of chemical or nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And to pay their final respects to Queen Elizabeth II, who is interred in Westminster Hall, thousands of people from all over the UK stood in lines for hours, a time overnight along the River Thames. Well, that's it for today's World News. For more news, you can follow us on our special social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for watching, and take care.